Right now in South Korea, there is a man who wakes up every morning, puts on a crisp suit, and heads to an office at one of the biggest tech giants on the planet. We are talking about the kind of global conglomerate where getting a job is like winning the lottery. He is a high performer who navigates complex projects, deals with massive budgets, and brings home nearly $4,000 every single month. By every standard of modern society, this man has made it. He is a success, he is a provider, and he is an adult. But here is the punchline that has the entire country screaming at their screens. If this man spends a single dollar on a video game, he gets treated like a naughty child. He gets treated like a naughty child who stole a cookie from the jar, and this isn't just a small disagreement over a credit card bill. This is a full-blown domestic investigation because he dared to spend $75 over the course of 50 days on his only hobby. $75 is about $1.50 a day, and in the middle of Seoul, that is the price of a cheap convenience store coffee. Yet, his wife didn't just get annoyed, she went into full disciplinary mode, threatening him that she would not leave him alone if he ever did it again. Imagine being a top executive at a multi-billion-dollar company and then coming home to be interrogated over the price of a ham sandwich. It is hilarious, it is tragic, and it is exactly what everyone is talking about right now across the country. But why would they actually demand this level of control over a grown man in such a successful position? Why would a woman look at her husband, the man who pays for the apartment, the insurance, the car, and the food, and decide that a $1.50 a day is a crime? When you dig into the core of the problem, you find a world where everything has been turned into a cold, hard transaction. In this specific dynamic, the marriage isn't a partnership of love, it is a cutthroat corporation where the husband is just a piece of equipment that produces cash. We are looking at a culture where some women have been raised to believe that their entire identity and power come from their ability to squeeze every drop of value out. They squeeze every single drop of value out of their husband's salary as if it were a ruthless capitalist game. If he spends money on a digital sword, that is money that isn't being saved for a bigger apartment or a more expensive school for the kids. In her eyes, he isn't a human being who needs to relax, he is a utility and a money-making machine. And when a machine starts using its own fuel for fun, the manager gets angry about the total ownership of another person's labor. She isn't worried about the $75, she is worried that he still thinks he owns a part of his own life. So, if that is the underlying conflict, how does it actually play out in their daily lives and household management? You have to understand the way the money flows in these households where the husband gets paid and his entire salary immediately disappears. The salary disappears into the wife's controlled accounts, and from there he pays for the high-interest apartment loan, the insurance, and the phone bills. After all that, he is handed a tiny allowance of about $200 a month for himself, which is his only freedom. $200 for a whole month in one of the most expensive cities in the world is what he uses for his commute, his lunches, and his survival. So when he finds a tiny bit of extra cash and puts it into a mobile game, it is his way of staging a quiet rebellion. It is a desperate attempt to find some peace in a world that treats him like a walking ATM machine. In a game, he can be a hero, he can be a winner, and he can finally have some agency. But in his own living room, he is just a management target who needs to be monitored at all times. The irony is that the more he earns, the more strictly he is managed by the system he built. The successful job becomes a golden cage where the door is locked from the inside by a budget sheet. But wait, what happens when they get exactly what they asked for in terms of total financial control? What happens when the wife finally achieves total control over every single penny in the household budget? This is where the hypocrisy starts to smell, because while she is screaming at him, she is spending hundreds on home shopping. She spends on home shopping or expensive cafe visits that she labels as necessities, creating a double standard that would make a politician blush. In this specific case, it turned out the wife actually came from a wealthy family and was getting extra money from her parents on the side. So the family wasn't even poor, they weren't starving, and they weren't in danger of losing their home anytime soon. Her anger wasn't about survival, it was about the idea that his hobby is sinful while her lifestyle is proper. It is a fake austerity where she wants him to live like a monk so she can feel like a superior manager. But this backfires spectacularly because humans cannot live without a reward for their labor and their sacrifices. If you tell a man that his only purpose in life is to work and be scolded, he is going to stop caring. He is going to quiet quit the marriage and effectively stop putting in the emotional effort required for a partnership. We are seeing a generation of men who look at this and realize it is cheaper and happier to live in a tiny one-room apartment alone. They would rather live alone than be a high-earning slave in a luxury condo with no autonomy. Can you imagine the daily grind of this guy who spends 10 hours a day in a high-pressure office? He deals with deadlines and corporate politics until he is exhausted and his brain is completely fried at the end of the day. All he wants is to tap a few buttons on his phone during his commute to feel a tiny spark of joy. But he has to hide it and look over his shoulder like he's dealing drugs, all for a $75 game purchase. It is a total collapse of respect and the fundamental trust that should exist between two partners. In a healthy relationship, you have a black box of money that your partner doesn't question or scrutinize. You need that tiny bit of privacy to stay sane, but when that is gone, you are living in a domestic prison. People are calling these men the provider traps because they are trapped by their own success and expectations. They did everything right, they got the job, they got the house, and they got the wife. And the prize for winning the game of life is that they aren't allowed to spend $2 on a digital coffee. They aren't allowed to spend $2 without a fight, which is why the fallout on the internet has been so explosive. It has touched a nerve that is raw and bleeding, making people realize the modern dream looks like a nightmare. There are men now who are literally setting up shadow bank accounts just to hide their gaming money from their wives. They are lying about how much overtime they work so they can keep a few extra dollars for themselves and their hobbies. It is a farce where husbands use complex crypto schemes just to buy a new pair of sneakers or a video game. They do this without their wives getting a smartphone alert, and we might see secret gaming bunkers appear. Bunkers disguised as late-night study rooms where corporate men can pay for an hour of peace from the internal Minister of Finance. It is a ridiculous way to live, but when you treat a partner like a line item on a spreadsheet, this is the result. The most cynical part of all this is the devaluation of what men actually enjoy and find meaningful. If he spent that same $75 on a productive book or a healthy gym membership, she wouldn't have said a word. But because it was a game, it is labeled as waste, which is part of an ongoing ideological war. She decided that his joy has no value because it doesn't look like her specific version of success. But who is she to decide the value of his stress relief after a long and grueling work week? If $75 keeps him from having a total breakdown after a 60-hour work week, that is the best investment possible. Instead, she treats it like a betrayal and is saving for a future that will be filled with deep resentment. They will have a beautiful apartment and a huge bank account, but they won't even be able to stand each other. Think about the metaphor of the circus elephant, a massive, powerful animal that could easily knock down the tent. But it stays tied to a tiny plastic chair because it was trained from a young age to believe it can't move. That is this husband. He has the economic power and is the one making all of the money for the family. He could walk away and live like a king on his own salary, but he is psychologically shackled by social respectability. He accepts the tiny leash because he doesn't want to cause a scene or lose the domestic peace. He is the vending machine that is forbidden from drinking its own soda, despite producing it for everyone else. The moment he tries to take a sip, he gets his hand slapped by the owner of the machine. It is a fundamental cruelty disguised as good management, and it leads to the lowest birth rate in the world. Where does this lead? It leads to a society where people are terrified of commitment and marriage. Why would anyone sign up for this? Why would a young man work his tail off just to be controlled? The system is broken because it has forgotten that people are more than their financial functions in a household. A husband isn't just a provider function, he is a person, and a person needs to breathe to stay sane. When you turn a marriage into a corporate merger, you shouldn't be surprised when the employees start looking for the exit. This viral story isn't just about a game, it is about the death of the individual in a cold culture. It is a warning to anyone who thinks they can build a life on control instead of respect for their partner. So next time you see a guy on the subway, staring at his phone and playing a simple game, don't judge him. He might be a high-flying executive who is currently spending his only $2 of freedom for the entire day. He is fighting for his sanity in a world that wants to manage every single breath he takes. The $75 wasn't a waste of money, it was a tax on his sanity to keep going. And if he isn't allowed to pay it, the whole house is eventually going to come crashing down on them. That is the raw reality of the modern dream. It is a shiny, expensive cage where the key costs a lot. The key costs a lot more than $75. It is a story of a man who won but lost his soul. It is the ultimate mockery of success. Fuel the truth at Dating in Korea, support the structure, and stay safe.